Тоже неплохо.
Это я помню такой подход, да.
Добрый день, дорогие друзья. У нас очень интересно.
Good afternoon, dear friends. I believe we will have a very interesting session today. So far, the only interesting thing about it is the topic, but I am confident that our today's participants will help make this session very interesting. We have Mikhail Oseevskiy, CEO of Rostelecom, Maxim Akimov, CEO of Russian Post, and Vyacheslav Nikolaev, CEO of MTS. You know, there is this myth that corporate culture eats up digitalization and other things because, you know, strategy is simply disappearing when corporate culture kicks in. Digitalization covers everything. So there is this hypothesis, which we're going to talk about, that corporate culture can simply swallow whole the digitalization. We have a brilliant panel of experts, and we will look in great details. We'll start with Mikhail Oseevskiy, CEO of Rostelecom. The government has a controlling stake in the company, so we would like to ask you whether there is any difference between digitalization as pursued by the government and private companies. Are there any inconveniences because the company is controlled by the government? Any difficulties it experiences in digitalization? Besides, the company has a great deal of additional social burden, social responsibilities like bandwidth, internet. And we know that the company is quite active. It performs some semi-government functions at the same time. It is quite active as a private company would be as a player in the market. So what role does digitalization play in that? Well, let's start with the glossary and the terminology. You know, the specific feature of the three companies that we represent, as well as the difference we have from, you know, metal producers or from oil producers, consists in the fact that digitalization for us is an internal process. At the same time, all of us are working in the market by promoting, by launching, and by selling new products, new services. And in that sense, we act as a driver for movement forward. And this is a very important aspect.
Если говорить про внутренние
to discuss the issue that you've raised. As far as internal processes go, each and every company has their own internal processes and procedures and principles, but I think more or less we resemble one another. At first, we want new business processes to appear, processes aimed at facilitating our workflow, economizing, saving time, reducing costs, using fewer people, you know, because labor costs go up. Of course, on the one hand, it's good because it means that real disposable income goes up, but at the same time, it serves as a signal to private companies, making them give some thought to where they can do without human labor. Secondly, it's about our activity in the market. Each and every company like ours has a niche, has an area of specialization. In certain fields we compete, in others we are working on our own. But I would like to point out that Russia is very advanced in terms of implementing IT technologies into different aspects of our life. This goes for the basic infrastructure in particular. Let's take Europe. We cannot see the same quality of internet even in the most well-developed regions in Europe. We have a very good dialogue fostered with the government. Well, when we go abroad, I think we all had to deal with the authorities abroad, and it takes a very long time to get anything done. It takes a lot of procedures and red tape, and it's not anything like what we do in Russia, where it's so pleasurable to deal with authorities thanks to the new procedures that have been implemented. But what about the difference? Well, Maxim and I represent companies where the government acts as a shareholder, and also the government participates in corporate governance. MTS is a private company. However, it has to be in compliance with the relevant public standards. It has to follow the Russian legislation and the Russian government decrees. But as far as companies go where the government has a controlling stake, I can say that each and every government brings in something new. On the whole, the corporate governance practice as of now is not that different. It's not that varied. If we look at private companies and at government-controlled companies, I used to work in private companies and big companies. I also worked in companies where the public had a stake. As far as Rostelecom goes, nominally, the government possesses the controlling stake, and we have, however, a very varied palette of shareholders. We have big institutional investors like the VTB, we have Western funds, and very many private companies. Many of them are still shareholders since the privatization. Many are new investors, and all of them expect us the same results the shareholders of MTS, Beeline, or others wait for. They want a return on investment, they want dividends, they want profitability, they want new products to hit the market, as well as new services. But of course, there are some peculiarities in terms of corporate governance. Well, to cite an example, I have 13 key performance indicators, which to me is absolutely anachronistic. Yes, and as a result, as managers, we understand what our priorities are. But from the former point of view, the government is lagging behind, and private investors are far more proactive, they're far more flexible, and they can shift their priorities, if need be, very swiftly. And this is probably the difference between big companies and the government. Now, concerning the rest, I think we're all working in a competitive environment. We're fighting for the client. So I think it's of a little help, because this quasi-government status makes it easy to talk to the government, and it's not that big of an encumbrance. Well, to be honest, as far as corporate governance goes sometimes, and we've got to be honest about that, the government sets some objectives that economically are not always obviously advantageous. Debatable. Well, not exactly obvious, as it were. You know, Maxim used to work for the government, and other colleagues understand that sometimes there are objectives you have to achieve very fast, and it takes money and resources to get there. The margin can be different, but Rostelecom is first and foremost a market-based company. 80% of our revenue, 90% of our profits, we make that in the market. Let's move on to Maxim Akimov. Maxim, it's an open secret that for the last 10 to 15 years, the Post has always had the image of a very big maladroit monster. Well, I wouldn't say monster, you know, a very big giant that moves very slowly. But now some reform has kicked in. It started several years ago. Right now the momentum is growing, and right now it's becoming increasingly better. The Post has improved across the country on a nationwide scale. But why has it taken so long? What is the problem there? And what about the corporate culture, which is the centerpiece of our today's discussion?
Разворачивалось и
Do you think it's the corporate culture that is to blame for the
сейчас.
Post having taken so much time to take a turn for the better? And has this process gained any traction right now, any momentum? I agree with almost everything that you said. Mikhail and I, we live in a competitive environment. And regarding the government stake, it might seem that we have some exclusive advantage that has nothing to do with the market, something that is entirely stemming from the government and certain segments that are closed to other participants. Well, actually, telecom industry is a hyper-competitive environment, and you have to fight for each and every ruble and your margin profits for any new feature in your product. Sometimes, it's a matter of seconds, not minutes, as far as putting a product on the market goes. And
электронная коммерция, да, то, что
e-commerce, domestic supplies and transfers,
услуги.
There are traditional post services. We have many aspects, many facets to think about, and post has undergone very serious evolution. The first stage was about bringing together the Russian Post as a single company, and Dmitry Straknov is to be credited with that. And then the privatization happened thanks to Nikolai Podguzev and his team. Right now, we're trying to revisit our operational model. We're trying to set the best benchmark for the Russian Post in terms of manufacturing our goods, what our products are, what the structure is, what value added we can offer to the client. So there are 4 objectives we are pursuing. First, we need to center and rally the company around the logic of the product. This is very simple in theory, but it's very difficult in practice. And a vertically organized company is immensely difficult. This is a big company with functional silos. It's a vertically oriented company, and you cannot replicate the startup model in it.
Распоряжение ресурсов.
Like, the freedom to manage the backlog, the reallocation. You need to shift the center of decision-making, and that requires restructuring all decision-making processes. Usually, power is concentrated in functional blocks. One, ensure, some manufacture, protect, and sell. Mikhail is absolutely right to say that we are digital in essence, because up to 1/4 of our revenue comes through digital channels, either through the website or through the digital application, something that sets us apart from the rest of the market. And here is where the second objective comes in. How do we promote digitalization, pushing it beyond the digital contour? You usually have the IT infrastructure, the code and infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, and some other departments for whom IT agenda is something peripheral. But it shouldn't be like that, and there should be no silos. And digitalization should be all permeating. And this is the direction we are pushing our company in, from support to general manufacturing, to operational platform, to logistics, to car fleet, to carriages, to sorting. Everywhere, digitalization should be present, not just in the IT segment. The third objective is also hard, but very practical.
Быстро откликаться на рыночные.
How does our company respond swiftly to market innovations?
Как бы тейлоринг продукта тяжело пробивается сквозь бюрократическую вертикаль.
It's very hard to tailor the product and push it through the hierarchy. So people on the ground have an idea. And in order to push this through, it takes months, and the product can be stillborn in the end.
У тебя выручка.
Besides, traditional businesses are very good for such companies. You have a very big revenue, you've got plenty of resources, plenty of powers. But, you know, this is where stagnation kicks in, and we understand that in the next 10 years, it's going to decrease by 6 to 8% per year. And all of a sudden, a person comes who says that he needs money, he has a brilliant idea. You know, it's very hard to make the company accept this risk. And this has to be done on systemic nature. So this is kind of an internal venture fund, which is supported with internal resources. It's not enough to make, you know, an internal accelerator when the CEO comes a couple of times. It cannot be a one-off thing, one-time thing. You need to be risk-oriented. And besides, you need to remember that sooner or later someone will come and will try to monitor you and check you, like the prosecutor's general office, or the prosecutor general's office, or the chamber of auditors. And we understand why this is going to happen, because, you know, there's the government, and the government has put their trust in us. And this, of course, makes risk culture difficult. And the fourth risk is the competition for human personnel, for human capital. And that is why in the field of technology, this competition is so fierce. And I think our HR image has significantly improved, because not just money attracts people. People also want to have a chance to solve difficult problems. This is a challenge, especially for those who are in the technological industry, and these are the 4 avenues we're actively pursuing as of now. We are hopeful that this will help us address the main objective our shareholder has set before us. Getting back to what you asked, Oleg, we shouldn't forget that apart from being one of the biggest companies, the Post also has some internal regulations, and our mission is to be present where no one else is present, and that costs us around 30 billion rubles per year. Mikhail has touched upon that. He spoke about the low margin. Besides, our logistics network, which is very ramified, very widespread. I think we'll have to plunge into greater depths there, because this is a very serious topic. It's very salient, and it's related to a global strategic challenge all of us are faced with right now. Yes, let's get back to that. But before that, Vyacheslav, I'm sorry, this is a little bit unfair. The other colleagues, I asked them about problems, and you are one of the leading companies, and you are carving a piece of the cake for yourself in many segments. So digitalization for you is a success story, and it's going forth. Well, it's never over, but still. What are the main ingredients to such a success story? Well, the most important thing is never to say that it's a success story and that transformation is over. Interestingly, I think this is not the first digital transformation we are going through. Our company has been there for 25 years now. But from the very beginning, we were a digital company. The very standards we complied with were digital. So from that point of view, our company being digital per se and dealing with digitalization for others, I think is something we need to take into account, and I almost fully agree with what the colleagues have said. I would like to say that technology is moving forth at a great pace, and if you were digital 10 years ago, that doesn't mean that you are still digital. Private companies are faster in making decisions on changes. We have a board of directors, and they make swift choices if need be.
С телекомами, но у нас уже больше там треть доходов идет не от
And very often we are still compared to telecom companies, but 1/3 of our companies are not from telecom, and all of our income comes from digital sources.
управляют бизнесом, она все равно есть любой большой компании.
And any big company has this problem of when the function sets tune to your business. And even though our company is private, it doesn't mean that our shareholders are any less interested in where their money goes.
Думал над темой нашей дискуссии.
When I thought about the topic of our discussion, I understood that there was no simple answer to this issue. This is a recipe with plenty of ingredients, and all of them need to be there, and there needs to be the right balance struck between these ingredients. You need to come to realize that you need digitalization. Second, you need to get a team that is going to want to digitize, and the team have to be motivated,
Когда генеральный директор,
On the one,
нормальный генеральный директор,
it's one thing when
на те КП, которые есть, потому что
a CEO
визионерской деятельности
doesn't always glance back at KPIs
мотивировано в том,
because he's a visionary. But anyway, you need a motivating system. And this year, we've overhauled our motivation system, especially the long-term system. 1,200 people are now motivated, and that is pegged to the cost of shares of MTS, and 30% of them get real shares, and it's all entirely contingent on how well they're doing, how they're performing.
к вам не пойдут те самые.
Yes, you need motivation, otherwise you will not be able to get the people we are fighting for. I think, if you'll allow me, you've touched upon a very interesting topic that's of great importance, of great consequences, especially right now, motivation through shares.
Зачастую говорят сотрудники.
What
Очень здорово.
do employees say very often? It's all great, but there are some global risks which
Повлиять и стоимость.
we can not affect under any circumstance. And the package of our shares and how much it costs is entirely dependent on global trends in the Russian market and the international markets. So I think
быть такими более
that approaches have to be more flexible as well as more diversified. Well, I totally disagree. I think it's a whole different universe.
нынешний момент вам как раз
Well, maybe at this point of time that'd be good. Well, let's just put aside this question.
Этот риск, но с другой
I understand this risk.
минуту сказать о том, что у вас должна быть команда единомышленников.
But what I say is that you need to have a team of like-minded persons, of people who share your passion. And if they're motivated by the shares of the company, I think that's the right thing to do, because on the one hand, they have their own objectives. At the same time, this long-term motivation helps align them with the rest of the team. This is a unifying factor which is of great consequence. To all of that, you need to add new technology. New technology pops up all the time. We have especially vice president. One is responsible for telecom, and the second is responsible for new tech. New tech is the most important part of everything and of all. We are constantly reinventing ourselves as a digital company, and you need to set up a mechanism for this continuous transformation, otherwise it's not going to work. All controlling functions have to become service function. Let's take procurement.
Никакого отношения не имел, работал со стартапами.
We have a person in procurement who has an absolutely different mindset. He used to work with startups in the past.
закупки в последние, там, не знаю, 5 лет.
So if you take a person who's been responsible for procurement worth billions of rubles, you cannot simply change their mindset in a blink of an eye. And you need a mixture of people, a blend of people who have different perspectives, different angles. And right now our procurement is undergoing shifts. It's no longer a function, a control, it's just
Вообще всех направлений.
a new service. And the same applies to all areas of our work. And there are many areas, and of course our headquarters, well, they are filled to the brim with work to be done.
С организаторами как раз темы нашей
When the organizers and I discussed the topic for our today's session, we meant precisely that. Because this is
компании выстроены
corporate culture par excellence, how your company structures
значит, того, что делают.
your activities related to new tech, what your teams do, what your procurement team does.
Примерно одни. Я
So there are hierarchical structures, be that in the government or in the private sector, they are almost the same. I also work in a government-run
legal,
structure.
продажи.
If you take this hierarchical structure and how you turn that,
У нас нет.
you know, it's very difficult, it's immensely difficult.
К успеху любой сервисной
Конкретно,
функции,
да.
к успеху продуктовой
И
команды.
вот
And you've got to create this link between the overall success and the success of the service team. Yes, and that's where the risk of digital transformation kicks in. When you start trying to demolish what's already working, trying to reinvent that, reshape that, there is the risk of simply losing the business. When other people come, people who have no institutional memory, who do not know what this business is about. Do you see any risk like that
говорят, там еще
from your own experience, how to mitigate these risks?
всем, и вы кажете,
And
вопрос.
I would also like to ask another question about the risks and about the human capital.
Change people. На русский ее трудно.
You know, change people or change people, this axiom. If people won't change, you have to change the people.
Один из факторов риска, но
And this is one of the risk factors. At the same time, it's a success factor. So what's more important to you in your particular case? Would you try to change
но mindset, там,
the mindset of your current employees, however difficult that may be? Or do you think economic efficiency is better, and if the person is not right for the job, you won't have any qualms in separating with them and letting them go? You know, sometimes it's cheaper to keep a loyal employee, reskilling him or her, than finding someone from the market. So right now we are moving towards a free discussion. I think no one is going to be against if we interrupt one another, if we ask clarifying question. Let's start with you, Mikhail. I think there is no universal answer. It's entirely dependent on the management model, on the governance model, on what you think the role is of a specific person, specific employee. We decided to pursue the path of a holding company. We have 9 big units, and one of them about communication, and the rest are separate, well, not companies, holding companies, I would say. So as a key governance, an umbrella company, we govern the capital flows like a governing company. We are also trying to build a strong top management in each and every cluster, and humanity hasn't been able to come up with anything better so far.
With respect to manpower, well, it's diverse. Like in the functional security segment, we have RTC Solar, a spin-off, a company of our umbrella. The mean age of workers' day is 27. In case we look at the telecom business, the conventional business, there are employees in their 40s. Well, and what distinguishes us from other digital colleagues, peers of ours, OTT, for example, OTT cinema, theaters, social media, and others. Well, the point is, what distinguishes us is that we have a lot of tangible assets on our balance sheet, and it is scattered across the country. So we do have to have people there on payroll that will definitely have to maintain the infrastructure. And people want to move to big cities. I moved once to a settlement with 5,000 residents only. It's like a 2 hours journey from Moscow. And the people working there are aged 50. And where are the youths, I asked them. In Moscow, they responded. In Siberia, they would first go to Novosibirsk and then to Moscow. Well, this migration is global. It is a global pattern. It's not specific to this country. And we started discussing the pandemic. How do you treat COVID? I asked them. We don't treat it at our local hospital because all the doctors left, because they would receive the take-home pay of 50,000 rubles here, and they go to Moscow and receive twice this amount or 5 times this amount. And this is a global problem for us, to provide for the decent livelihoods for our people all across the country. And to respond to this question, we need to fancy the desired image of the future. We should come to terms between ourselves. That relates to the government, that relates to infrastructure maintenance. So the picture in Moscow and like in a settlement that is 2 hours drive from Moscow may be different. Well, coming back to the digital transformation agenda, do you think it's real, it's feasible, it's tangible, or is it theoretical? Well, my vision is pragmatic. Well, digital solutions are a toolkit to bring about change. It's not a self-sustaining goal, no. It is just a means. It may make your services a bit faster and more convenient. But, we have just been discussing that you cannot go digital in bits. You either have a full tilt digital culture or you don't. Well, life is more diverse. Maxim and I work together, and our subscribers that reside in the countryside are elderly people, and they don't want to use their personal accounts. And Maxim fetches them the invoices, the bills, and they would go to a Sberbank office and pay. In Moscow, we don't do that anymore. So, it is very diverse. And we need to proceed from the interests and the needs of our clients. So let's ask Maxim the same question. Well, I think, the main risk is lagging behind somewhere. And in our company we have made an overhaul. Now the product factory has the center stage and manufacturing support and sales channels and digital channels. Via these, we receive around a quarter of revenue. But in all the segments, the staff is digitalized. Because you cannot
будете делать
do state-of-the-art logistics without integrating with your partners. You are to manage thousands of units and items, and that must be done on a digital platform.
не осталось. Там
It can't be done otherwise.
проблемы и вызовы, связанные либо с территориальными
If not,
это важнейший вопрос, что мы
there
в
will
другую сторону.
be a rise of challenges in like territorial disproportions. We will not be able to find people there who will be our clients there in 10 years.
Транзакций, там ARPU.
How shall we depreciate that infrastructure?
Да, 3 транзакции в год при той же
If we have 3 transactions per annum, and the overheads would be huge, and the transport and logistical costs would be huge. You know, we have settlements and towns where people and villages where people use the landline phone, and the distance between that village and a bigger city would be like 30 miles. And the poles with the line would go there.
Риски.
So it's quite costly. Well, I look at what Maxim has said. In his case,
Уже просто не может на том
the digital transformation is a must-have because it is the overall landscape that enables that. You know, being around at the market and being able to present an offering requires obligers to do that. What is the percentage of people you had to replace at your head office within this concept of 4 units?
Сравнить с тем, что было.
I mean, it's a brand new mindset. Well, we
2 года моего
moved step by step, and we were quite careful, and we had
среди топов,
to
значит,
place around 60% of top managers. And by the way, in February,
это
I'll be marking my 2 years in company. And by the way, some of the mid-tier personnel of ours were promoted to the top level, which means that the social lifts are fine with us, but still 60% of top managers were replaced.
приходят,
And
это, конечно, носители новой, другой совершенно культуры.
the newcomers
Людей с рынка берем.
are the holders of new culture.
Их ужасно
And we employ
мало. Людей, которые способны на себя
people, and we scout for people
мыслить как
and
микропредприниматель.
hire them. These are micro-entrepreneurs, and they have a different mindset.
Из него, значит,
And we try to
отгасим энтузиазм и, конечно,
segregate them
культуру, которая бы
with our rules, which is the wrong thing. What we should do instead is to come up with an entrepreneurial enabling culture.
разумный характер, постепенно.
And these must be incremental changes, gradual. But I believe
Это уже не риск, Олег. Это,
that it is
мне кажется, лет там 5-
not a risk.
проехали этап рассуждения о том, нужно
We
ли
passed the stage of discussing whether the companies need that 5 or 7 years ago. Look at metallurgy companies. They have digital marketplaces, and they promote the digital sales channels now.
например,
And they digitalize their manufacturing. Look at petrochemicals like Sibur and Gazprom Neft.
Да,
They are digital leaders.
3 компании собрались, которые на таком рынке
Here we have 3 companies
невозможно. И, в принципе,
that are present in the segments that oblige them to go digital.
сейчас мы до вас дойдем. Просто
And in a minute we'll talk to you, but you know, I have been dealing with other
я его поставил.
industries as well, and well, the
Про металлургов мы говорили, про нефтепереработку и так далее.
questions on the agenda, they are different.
Он ставился в таком, в пилотном режиме. У нас денег
And in metallurgy, they kind of spared this thought, saying, okay, we have enough money and everybody goes digital, let's pilot that. But with you, it's different. You are a digital company.
отличия. Поэтому я, наверное,
And so there are sectoral differences, definitely.
точно о той части, про которую мы говорим.
And let me come back to people.
Вот все три компании
All the three
на одном рынке
companies
работают с людьми, пытаются их хантить.
try to hunt for people in adjacent segments of the market.
Мы тоже видим, что
And
находить в компании не
we know
являющихся
that it is quite hard
как таковыми айтишных людей.
for a company
Звезды все,
that is not an IT developing company to find
которые разрабатывают,
IT developers
затаскивают
and software developers, because the leading developers, the best developers, the cream of the crop, they want to go to
потому что
software developing companies. It's more prestigious for them.
работают
So, and hence,
в целом, хотя
for you, not having it as its core business, well,
металлурги покупают, значит,
hankering after them is kind of more problematic. Metallurgy companies offer big salaries as well as oil companies, but what about you and you?
проще ситуация, потому что да,
Probably your standing is simpler. Yours is a digital company from the outset, and you probably
качество уровня
selected
мнения. Насколько
candidates of
у вас
the necessary skills and capabilities and qualifications.
отслеживаете, потому что технологии
But what is the churn rate at your company?
по этому поводу
Are you following that? Are you keeping track of that? There's been a lot of publications on that,
радикально поменять
business publications, and views on how to
свои цифровые компании,
organize business processes have
отсортировали какое-то количество.
dramatically changed, and so you have had several waves of upheaval, so probably you changed your practices too. Yes, both points are right, that we are a digital company from the outset, which allows us to retain a big proportion of our team, although it's not the majority, but to have the core people that have a good knowledge of our business. These are active and digital people, and we can attract very salient, bright people from the market, lure them in, and
в области IT,
the biggest changes of ours were in the IT, and like we hired Pavel Voronin, who has become our leading vice president,
там сильно очень внутри команда поменялась. Мы за последние
and he's so young,
тысячу
and we have hired 1,500
наш
developers
тысячами, потому что мы же еще и
of late, over the past year and a half, and we have our own billing unit, and now we have 2,000 vacancies open
разные стейки, потому что
and
мы
outstanding.
плюс к этому мы же выделили, мы одна из тех немногих телекоммуникационных
And we are one of the few telecom companies
да, то есть у нас
that
стала легкая компания телекоммуникационная и большая инфраструктура
have spinned off telco
облачного провайдера,
and a cloud provider,
правильное качество внутри себя и правильную инфраструктуру и
and having the proper infrastructure
сервисы, которые там есть.
with the cloud-based services.
Активный набор людей, причем
And here we are now hiring a lot of people for that spin-off.
обратно в Россию те, кто уезжали, работали.
And we see that many people that went to work abroad
Больше всего
come back
части. И это, кстати,
to
с
join us.
предыдущим вопросом, от которого мы ушли, потому что
And that has a bearing on the previous item we discussed.
добавление уровня продаж в традиционный бизнес. А если это трансформация
Like,
самого процесса,
it's not upping the sales,
мы, например, эту задачу решили
it's about transforming the business, so it has more risks.
часть
And we
микросервисную структуру, чтобы потом уже перестраивать
kind of had those legacy systems in a separate place, in a silo.
эту часть, которую
We spin them off.
хотел заменить, отметить. И плюс людей нужно набирать новых.
And we had to hire new
Я, собственно, сам
people.
по образованию
because the technological progress is quite rapid. You know, I'm a kind of an IT graduate. I had
к нам, и поэтому
the cybernetics as my major back then, but you know, I'm light years behind the guys who join us now.
Еще
Do you have your own IT recruitment and infrastructure?
линейного персонала.
Yes, we do, and we have 300,000 linear manpower on payroll. This is our
Базовый производственный.
main target for digitalization.
Туда к оператору почтовой связи, к почтальону.
And kind of the postman, the drivers, the sorting people
Топах. Вот, мы в этом
also
компания с точки зрения просто
must become digitally literate.
Сейчас вот
Yes, we have touched upon the interaction
университетским
between the employers and the universities and colleges,
двигаться к
the education side. And I think that this model is going to change.
очевидно, что
It is obvious today that the sooner
университет или колледж
a university student
деятельность
starts some hands-on and practical activities, the better for him and for the future
мне вообще кажется, что
employers.
закладываются в школе.
And I have a vision that
Дальше нужно
the
правильно
bulk of the knowledge we receive is at school.
практически навыки. Мы вот
And later on we just hone our skills.
мы проводим всероссийскую олимпиаду.
And we hold school contests across the country. We
С теми базовыми вузами, с которыми
find 100 pupils, school children, each year. And afterwards we try to
справедливости ради школьник
to transfer these talented kids to universities. Well, actually, to tell the truth, a pupil of the 10th grade is capable of hacking 80% of systems in our country, you know, a talented one. So we should bring them to the bright side. And in Moscow region, we established a college together with the government of Moscow region, and we train technical professionals there. They have 3 days of theoretical studies and 2 days of internship and practice in our units, and definitely we try to retain them. And by the time they are about to graduate, their professional skills are in line with the market needs. So, you know, spending 4 years at university and not having a go, well, probably such people are inexistent. But, you know, so it's going to be more and more active. And for us, it is a matter of life and death. Because, you know, looking for new candidates costs us a fortune, and we have long-run strategies. And we, as anyone else, we have to launch educational programs and courses. The market is overheated. Now everybody does everything, and we have banks in our segment. And some of the banks try to scour the ground.
Это в целом, да, банки превращаются
And banks are turning
в специальные, да, IT-компании. Мы двигаемся
into
в самые разные стороны.
multi-role IT operators and companies. 3 years ago, Michael and I said the horror engulfed us, but we never knew what real horror means back then.
Мы даже не понимаем, а сейчас ужас или мы будем опять это вспоминать.
And we wonder whether now we're in a horrible position, or is it going to be a bright streak
Хочу каждому один
that we will perceive shortly afterwards. And we have less than 10 minutes left, and let me ask each of us one and the same question, which is quite simple. If we talk about the corporate culture and digital transformation, just please name at least one factor from your experience
учитывать
that must be
цифровой трансформации, чтобы корпоративная культура и
factored in
один как
while pursuing digital transformation, so that the corporate culture shouldn't devour that. You can name 2 or 3 or 1
очень важным.
something that you believe is of paramount importance. I know what to say, I know what to name, and it is going to seem facetious and ludicrous, but it is the corporate culture itself.
который называл, и мотивация.
To change it, you'll take all the pillars like the people, the motivation, etc., and you have to replace that. Maxim told you about the units, the functions. They balk.
Быть контролером, чем
They are loath to do all that because they want to hold the control instead of becoming like the service personnel. So the corporate culture must be altered, which is the hardest thing to do. You should
разными методами. Но вот это и есть главная задача.
persuade
Будет съедено на завтра.
all the employees to join you, to join your side, to side with you. Otherwise, it will devour you tomorrow. I agree with that, but I'll name 2 more things. Confidence and freedom, the latter not being a trendy word nowadays. Well, for me, I need a confluence of 2 things.
Клиент мне пишет,
The NPS, the satisfaction of clients.
это супер, то, что было, то, что
If they provide feedbacks like you, I break through, you are a star. Or I see people approaching me saying, wow,
когда люди
it is so cool here. It is a thrill and a drive.
а вот я пришел туда.
Or when people that left us
Это меня радует.
come back and say, I thought that you are bureaucratic, but I know what is bureaucratic now when I joined them. So I want these 2 things to happen.
То есть внутри нужна внятная опермодель, которая позволяет
Inside, we need a proper
терпимость
operational model that would provide for the risk tolerance, and freedom and confidence also matter,
с учетом скорости.
because given the pace of change in the segment,
Транслировать ее 20 лет,
like in the past you could come up with the infrastructure and
в общем,
keep using it for 20 years. Well, now it's gone, and it is like
Я бы таким фактором назвал
the star speed change. And Michael, I would call competition.
всех конкуренция.
The competition makes us change. Internal competition, global competition, domestic one.
У каждого из нас
And this is something that prods us in the butt.
Так и живем.
This is how we muddle through.
вопросам.
I have exhausted all my questions, and we have less than 5 minutes left. So, if you allow me, I'll wrap up our today's discussion, although it has been
Факторов трансформации в каждой компании.
quite diverse. The factors of digital transformation are numerous for each and every company.
Потому что понятие очень общее, и оно очень много чего в компании определяет.
Well, corporate culture is a very general notion and cannot be called a factor or an enabler or a driver.
Сколько вы там?
And it depends on the legacy and the history of a company like Post of Russia
Тоже, мне кажется,
has 300 years of track record. Rostelecom, well, probably may say it has 100 years of history starting from Golro.
момент нужно примерно
And, you may have different track records and perspectives,
рисковать, которое обеспечивает
but you all will end up
мнение, самостоятельность там.
with one and the same at the end of the day, the corporate culture of independence, autonomy, freedom, product-oriented approach,
Конкуренция,
and risk appetite and competition,
вопрос выживания, значит,
tolerance. It is a matter
цифровую трансформацию обеспечить.
of your survival. And without digital transformation, you will not be able to survive. And
Коротко,
for this sake, you'll have to change your corporate culture. Well, in a nutshell, it is like this, and then
и слава богу.
the specific case studies are to be mentioned. That was the general remarks. You know, each of us is happy
Если есть у кого-то у нас еще есть
or unhappy in their own way. Okay, anything more to add? Let's allow our viewers a bit of rest. Thank you.